Hi, my name is Alexia Morris, and this is my Edge 4030 presentation on criminal justice in Australia. So, for my Edge project, from May 9th to 21st in 2019 this year, I went to Australia. So our group, we started in Sydney, and then we went down to Melbourne, and then up to Noosa for a day or so on the beach, and then down to Brisbane, and we flew home from there. So what we did in Australia is we were doing a study abroad. We were looking at the criminal justice system in Australia, studying the differences between the Australian criminal justice system and the United States criminal justice system, and comparing the differences on how they're run, especially since we both came from the United Kingdom, specifically England, and how we both came from that same place, and how we both ended up in different places, and how our systems are different. This is a picture from when we went on a tour of the first courthouse in Sydney. So the reason I did this was because SUU has an experiential learning project that is required. This includes having to take 3 one-credit classes, and then the project itself is 40 hours of active work. And this EDGE project is what I chose to do for Australia. And yeah, this was definitely 40 hours, and it gave me some incredible learning experiences, and so I chose to do the study abroad as my experiential EDGE project. So while we were in Australia, we got to do some pretty cool stuff. Not all of it criminal justice related, but a lot of it was. So when we first got there, one of the first places we went to was the Royal Botanical Garden in Sydney. Lots of greenery, right smack dab in the middle of the big city. It was pretty cool. And we took some guided tours, and one of the places we looked at was the Circular Quay in Sydney, and this is the building that is right. This used to be the first building you would see when you came to Australia back when it was first settled. One of the most important things that we toured was the Rocks of Sydney. The Rocks is the place where they first landed, the convicts, the first shipment. They landed here and began to build their community. This was the beginning of Australia, basically. And this here is an anchor from one of the very first ships. In their library, they have this big old glass flooring that has an accurate depiction of the entire city of Sydney underneath, and you can actually point out where they first landed and where the water line is at now, because the water line is actually different. While we were in Melbourne, we noticed one very particular difference between the way the United States handles graffiti and the way the city of Melbourne does. Melbourne has several designated streets where they actually allow street art. They had some pretty incredible pieces, and these are some examples, and they have an entire alleyway dedicated to AC/DC. And this is one of the pieces that we saw there. So they said this actually helps with graffiti. They don't get it as much in other places in the city because they have designated alleyways where it's allowed. Some of the people that we talked to there was when we were in Melbourne, we had a sit-down meeting with some police officers in their police department. Got to ask them questions, and they asked us questions about how our police departments differ in our different countries. When we were in Brisbane, we got to sit down and talk to a criminal defense lawyer and ask him how their processes work and how his job is different than a lawyer would be perhaps in the United States. Also in Brisbane, when we visited the University of Queensland, we got to sit down and meet with a criminology professor who had actually lived in America for several years, so she had a very unique perspective and could actually herself tell us some differences that she noticed between what she saw in America and what she sees in Australia. It's a cool picture of the Forgan Smith building of the University of Queensland. So one highlight of our trip was actually not criminal justice related, but we were able to visit a koala sanctuary where they had not only koalas, but also kangaroos and wallabies, They had platypi, they had snakes, lizards, emus. They had pretty much every animal in Australia that you can think of. We got to take a picture and hold koalas, and we also got to feed the kangaroos and pet the kangaroos if they were out of their protected enclosure. Anyway, that was what I did for my Edge project, and it was a very incredible experience, and it is an experience that I will value for the rest of my life.